I have been working my way through the book of Job, looking at the Hebrew text inductively, uh, doing grammatical analysis, primarily of the verbal system and participles. But we are at chapter 24, and we're at verse 18 of chapter 24. So I want to pick up where we are and continue where we have been. Just a word about these verses that we will run into now. Job, we could say, ironically, I believe this is a difficult section, but it seems to me quotes his three friends in these verses. He has just illustrated the sins of the wicked that they do without seemingly incurring any judgment of God. He now, in effect, says, and you say, I'm seeing that this seems to be in the background in my understanding of the text. And you say, he is swift, that is, God is swift upon the face of the waters. Their portion is cursed in the earth, etc. Speaking of what they had said about God's judgment upon the wicked. And so Job, in irony, quotes them. And really, what he's showing all the way through here is God seems to be absent from immediately judging them. So, picking up and trying to follow his thought, in verse 18 it says, Kalhu al Pene Mayim. He is swift upon the face of the waters. Tekulal Helkatam Ba'aretz. That is, their portion is cursed or has been cursed in the earth. Notice here, tekulal is from kalal, to curse. Here we have a pual imperfect, third feminine singular from kalal. Notice the shava with the kibbutz, the doubling of the lamed, the middle radical, indicative of a pual stem. So their portion is cursed on the earth. Lo yifne derek keramim. Literally, he turns not by the way of vineyards, of the vineyards. Yivne is from pana, to turn. It is the cow imperfect third masculine singular from pana. So when we look at this verse, the sinner, you say, Job, following what seems to be Job's argument, is rapidly borne away by the stream. Their property is cursed, and they are not able to enjoy their own possessions and leave nothing behind for their children. So this is a reference back possibly to chapter 20, verse 17, or 15, verse 33, in the argument that the friends of Job have presented. And so in verse 19, it continues, Siyah gam chom, drought and heat, yigzalu me shelig. That is, drought and heat consume the snow waters, or the waters of the snow. The verb here means to rob. So drought and heat rob the waters of the snow. From gazal, it's a cow imperfect, third masculine plural from gazal. And then, so does the Sheol, those who have sinned. Sheol chata'u. Chata'u is from chata, to break a covenant or sin. It's the perfect third common plural. And what seems to be the thought here, let me just give a little bit of the background. The Arabian image uses heat and snow to make its point. Drought and heat quickly melt the snow which falls on the desert. When it is melted, there is no trace left that it was ever there. How unlike this is the fountain flowing from a deep spring. So the wicked are said to disappear as quickly as the snow does when the heat robs it, so to speak. Death consumes the sinner. As snow is melted by the drought and heat, so does Sheol consume those who have sinned. Sheol here in the Hebrew being a picture of death itself, the underworld. So again, he seems to be in irony, presenting all the way through here these previous arguments of his so-called friends. In verse 20, Yishkachehu lechem metako rima. That is, the womb forgets him, and the worm sucks him, literally, from matak. So yish kechehu is from shakach, to forget. It's the cow imperfect, a third masculine singular from shachach. And who is your pronominal suffix, third masculine singular. So the womb forgets him. The worm feeds sweetly on him, or the worm sucks him. Metako is from matak, to suck. It is the cow perfect, third masculine singular, followed by the pronominal suffix, third masculine singular, and the root is matak, to suck. So the worm feeds sweetly would be a possible rendition, sucking him. Yet shall he be od lo yizaker. Yet he shall be no more remembered. Yizacher is from zachar, to remember. It's a nifal imperfect, third masculine singular from zachar. Notice you have your I-A vowel pattern, doubling of the zayin, because the noon of the nifal stem has assimilated into the zayin. So yin zacher becomes ye zacher, with progressive assimilation of the noon into the zayin and the doubling of the zayin. So he shall no more be remembered, but tishaver ka'etz avla, and unrighteousness avla shall be broken as a tree, or is broken as a tree. Tishaver is the nifal imperfect third feminine singular from shavar, to break. And so the thought here seems to be that the wicked will be forgotten by the womb, the mother who bore him, and will be uprooted like an uprooted tree with irreparable damage. So like a tree, he's going to be forgotten, an uprooted tree, or forgotten so to speak, by the mother, even who bore him. Speaking of what the friends felt that would happen to the wicked. This, by the way, we could see a cross reference to this in Isaiah 49, verse 15. So as we come to 21, Job's friends then will give this as the reason for the extreme punishment of the sinner. Reading verse 21. And notice it reads, Ro'eh akara velo teled. He feeds or devours the barren that does not bear. Ro'eh is a cow participle masculine singular from ra'ah, to shepherd or feed upon, and akara means barren, lo teled from yalad. Historically, it was valad, where the vav elided or dropped out, and we had compensatory lengthening from the hirik to the tzeri. So he's looking again at the wicked, what they do. That is, he devours the barren that does not bear, but almana lo yeyetiv, and the widow, he does no good. He does no good, actually, concerning the widow. Yeyetiv is from yatav, to do good. And here we have a hifil, imperfect, third masculine singular from yatav. And so the thought here in verse 21 seems to be that Job's friends had given this as a reason for the extreme punishment of the sinner. Childlessness. According to the scriptures, it is the responsibility of children to care for their parents when they are old. Without children to protect them, they were an easy target for the wicked. And this would be especially true then of widows, who were easy targets of those that were wicked, those that wanted to do evil and defraud them, or deceive them and take their money or possessions away. So this is the seems to be what he's referring to here: the wicked, what they're doing to the barren and to the widow, to the orphan, so to speak, and widow. So then we move on to verse 22. Umashak abirim behocho. He draws away the mighty by his power. He arises, yakum velo ya'amin b'chayim. He rises up and he does not trust his own life, in his own life. Mashak is the cow, a perfect third masculine singular from mashak, to draw, and abirim means the mighty by his power, and he rises up. Yakum is from kum, the cow imperfect third masculine singular, and he does not cause to trust Ya'amin in his life. Notice Ya'amin is from Aman. We have the AI, the Pathak Hirik Yod, thematic vowel pattern, looking at a hifil imperfect third masculine singular. So he draws away the mighty by his power, and he raises up, and he does not trust his life. And the thought here in verse 21 seems to be this: Job's friends give this as the reason for the supreme punishment of the sinner in verse 21. That is, as we said, it was the responsibility of children to care for their parents when they are old. And what it looks like here is they're not doing that. Children, without children to protect them, they become, like we said, easy prey for those that want for the wicked. In the same way with widows. So this seems to be the thought. But then let me go to verse 22. I went back, to verse 21. But let me read on to verse 22. From verse 22 to 25, Job gives his reply, can we say, to the opinion of his friends. His experience contradicts their beliefs. God seems, literally, to prolong the life of the wicked. When they are ill, they recover. And that seems to be what is being spoken of here. He raises up and trusts not his own life, but yet he ends up recovering. And so as we look on in verse 23, God appears to give the wicked safety when he knows how evil they are. Notice verse 23. Yiten lo lavetach v'yisha'en. He gives to him safety, and he rests, or he is able to lean upon that. Ve'enehu al darchehim. And notice his eyes are upon their ways. Let me just look at the grammar a minute here. Yeten is from the Peinun verb natan. It's the cow imperfect third masculine singular from natan. So yinten becomes yitain, where the noon again by progressive assimilation has gone into the top. So though it be given him, or he is given, it is given to him to actually to be understood safe, or to be in safety, and he leans upon that. The yisha'en is from sha'an, to rest or lean. It's the nifal imperfect third masculine singular from sha'an. And notice again, we have the I-A vowel pattern in the imperfect, indicative of the nifal stem, where the noon of the nifal has assimilated into the sheen here. And yet his eyes are upon their ways. So in verse 23, it looks like the thought is God appears to give the wicked safety, even though he knows how evil they are, seems to be Job's argument. This, by the way, has parallel in Psalm 73:4 and Proverbs 15, verse 3. So then we continue in verse 24. Romu ma'at ve'enenu. They are exalted a little, or for a little while, and they then are not. And then the next phrase, the chumachu mekol yikafetsun. That is, they are brought low, and they are gathered in as all, or as all they are gathered in, as all others are. Notice vehumahu is from the root makan, uh, or makah, excuse me. It means to be brought low. Humahu is again from mahak. I should say mahak. Double, it looks like a double repeating of the kaf here. And we are looking at a hofal perfect third person plural, common plural from makak. So they are brought low as all they are gathered in, as all. Yekafetsun is from kafats, together, another nifal imperfect, third person plural, masculine plural from kafat. And then finally, they wither as the tops of the ears of corn. Ucherosh shibolet yemalu, as the tops of the ears of corn they wither. And the word wither is malal, and we're looking at, again, it appears to me a nifal imperfect, third person plural, masculine plural, from malal, to wither. And so in verse 24, the thought seems to be, Job repeats that the wicked usually die after a full life of esteem in their communities. He's argued that in 21:13. But just like all, they must die, but it's after a long life. So death comes quickly to them at the end of life without pain, he's arguing. They reach full maturity like the heads of grain and die a natural, what appears to be quick death. In chapter 5, verse 26, we see a similar reference. So what he's saying is, it doesn't really fit that God is just going to all of a sudden judge the wicked. It seems that they're able to linger on and have a long life, and at the end, it's just quietly dying, having had a very long and successful life. And yet, where is the judgment that comes? And this then concludes in verse 25. Ve'im lo afo mi yaksivenu. And if it be not so, what I've been saying now, who will prove me a liar? Who will cause me to be a liar? From chazav, it's a hifio imperfect, third masculine singular from chazav, followed by the pronominal suffix, first person singular, in the e here, with the hinge, a ni. So who will cause me to be a liar and make my speech of nothing? The yasem, the al milato, that is, and make to nothing my speech, or what I've said. He's challenging them. Am I not right in my argument, is his point. Veyasim is from, or veyasem is from sim, a middle weak verb, cow imperfect, third masculine singular. And milah means speech. So milati, my speech. In other words, are you able to make me, prove me to be false in what I'm saying, and make my speech of nothing, worth nothing? So this is basically his argument. He is using the argument that his friends have presented in irony and critiquing them in these verses, especially verses 18 to 24. And he's illustrating that what they are saying, in effect, about the swift judgment of the wicked does not prove always to be true. That seems to be his argument. And you know, one of the things that Job is trying to demonstrate is that their thesis that the righteous don't suffer, the righteous have a wonderful life, it's only the wicked that suffer. And so he's mainly critiquing their thought in that regard. Let me just say, when you look at the totality of Scripture, though, there is payday someday. There was a sermon that was preached, I believe, by a preacher, Robert G. Lee, I'm not sure. And the title of the sermon was Payday Someday. Even though the wicked seem to get by for a while, God's judgment finally comes. And it reminds me of a literary thought from Samuel, chapter 11 and 12, where David commits that which is wrong with Bathsheba, and he sends for her by Yishlach. She comes, commits adultery with David, and David commits adultery with her. And then to try to cover up her husband, he sent for Uriah by Yishlach to try to get him to go in to his wife, but he would not. So by Yishlach, he sent him back again and told Joab to put him in a place where he would die. And so that's what happened. And then by Yishlach, Joab sends word back to David and said, everything is okay. You can go ahead and take Bathsheba as your wife. And you know, when you read that text, you see a lot of Yishlaching going on. And he sent, and he sent, and he sent. And you say, where is God? Where's God? Where's the final judgment? And yet, when you read the text into chapter 12, it says, Vayishlach, and the Lord sent Natan to David and said, you are the man. And I've seen that section from a literary point of view. It's sort of like payday someday. It looks like people doing wrong can get by for a while, by Yishlach, by Yishlach, by Yishlach. But the final sending God does have in the final day of judgment on David. And I believe that's true as we look at Scripture. It may be that people can go through life, as Job is arguing, and he can critique the argument of his friends, that suddenly things happen in this life. But we know that there is a day coming when every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess. And this is important then to realize that when you look at the totality of Scripture, there is a final day of reckoning, a final day of judgment. And but I think Job's purpose here is not to deal with that as much as to critique his friends and their false hypothesis that Job must be suffering because he had sinned. And he's arguing and saying, no, that doesn't always work, that the righteous are always, not judged. Sometimes the wicked, it seems to go on and on. And yet, eventually, there will be a judgment. So Job is simply trying to critique the false theology of his friends that he must be wicked because he had been judged or had received some illness and had gone through the great problems that he's going through. So that's the argument of Job up to this point, and Job's reply to his friends, simply critiquing them for their wrong, can I say, presupposition that only the wicked suffer swift judgment in this world from God. He is simply saying that doesn't always prove true to his friends, and also arguing in the context of their critique that he is righteous, even though he's had to suffer with whatever it was, elephantiasis or whatever disease that he had.